Rebel Ridge is a new crime drama that just dropped on Netflix over this past weekend. This movie is directed by Jeremy Saulnier, or I forget his last name, but he's the guy that directed The Green Room. This movie stars Aaron Pierre, and it stars Sophia... You know what? I forget her name too. Let's just skip names for a second. So the plot here is that a former Marine goes to a small town trying to bail his cousin out of jail. And as he's trying to bail his cousin out of jail, he has to deal with the corruption of the local cops, these small town cops that are pretty much trying to make his life as difficult as possible. And he has to find a way to bring them to justice while also protecting his cousin. Thus, we have one of the most simple premises probably in Netflix history. You know, sometimes you talk about movies and they end up being slow burns. Like, slow burn is a term that is used a lot to describe certain movies. I've used that term plenty of times, and I will agree that this movie you could definitely classify as a slow burn. But this is one of those slow burns that is a slow burn after it comes out of the gate, hitting you in the face with some fire. Similar to that Latina girl that tied me to her bed down in Florida that one time. Sometimes you just like pain. Although I suppose a more accurate representation of somebody who likes pain is probably Paul Dano. Have you watched all of Paul Dano's movies? He's getting his ass beaten like, I don't know, 80% of them? I use the pain metaphor simply to say that this movie came out of the gates swinging. It comes out, and in the first scene, the first 10 minutes of the movie, I was hooked. The way that this film comes out grabs your attention and sets the stage for everything that is going to happen in the rest of the movie is why we have things like cold opens. It's why those things exist. It's why first impressions, opening scenes, intros, it's why all of that is so important. The first act of this movie, like roughly the first 45 minutes or so, is one of the best movies that I've seen all year for a multitude of reasons. First of all, let's talk about the direction and the visuals. One thing I appreciate about the camera work in this movie is the steadiness, the consistency, the way that it's able to take long takes and make them into something not grand or beautiful, but they have long takes that follow characters without a lot of cuts that really do showcase the tension. And that's what this movie does. It is a masterclass in building tension. Situations are intense, the characters are intense. If you're a guy that likes tension in movies, this movie's gonna deliver it to you and then some. Some of this is also due to the great performances that are in this movie, and I don't use the word great loosely. Shout out to Don Johnson. Don Johnson is like one of my favorite character actors, and I mean this in the best possible way. He's one of the best racist guys that you could ever put into a movie like this. Like, come on, you saw Don Johnson in the movie, you know the movie's about corrupt cops. What kind of cop did you think he was gonna be? Yeah, exactly that. You can tell he has a lot of fun in roles like this. He absolutely sinks his teeth into it. Shout out to the other character in the movie who's played by Sophia and something. Listen, I forget her name. I'm really bad with names. I apologize, but she was really good too, and she actually is more important in the movie than I would have realized. But absolutely, this is a superstar making turn for Aaron Pierre. Is his movie, and he owns and commands every single scene. He is great. Like, this is legitimately one of the best performances that I've seen all year. There is such a quiet confidence to his character, a swag that you can't really place. He feels quiet and reserved most of the time, but he's quiet and reserved without being completely stoic. Like, he has this smooth badassery to him. He's definitely a lot more patient than I would have been in some of the situations that pop up in this movie, I'll tell you that much. Love the fact that he is fully committed. Like, you can just tell when an actor is performing. You can tell if they're doing a good job or if they're there for the paycheck or whatever, but you can also tell when somebody has committed their entire soul and being to this character, and that's what he does. And when it's time to be a badass, he is 100% that dude. I do have to prepare you guys for this. This movie is not really an action movie. The trailers were very misleading. If you went into this movie expecting a big action thriller, that's not really what this movie does. I would say this movie still excels in a lot of the quiet moments. This movie is kind of unorthodox in its approach. Its story goes into different places that you wouldn't expect, but more importantly, the movie is just not an action movie. Do not go in thinking it's an action movie. You will leave disappointed. So like I said, the way that this movie started, in the first like 45-ish minutes of this movie, I was thinking, holy shit, this is gonna be one of the best movies of the year. And then things happen, and then the story goes in a different direction, and the last half of the movie I was kind of like, oh, well, this is fine, I guess. I don't want to misrepresent myself here. I did still enjoy the movie after a certain point, but that certain point is kind of what I would call the divisiveness in my enjoyment for this movie. A decision is made within the story to kind of shift the emotional crux of the story, and the movie becomes more of an investigative procedural. Still well acted, still well written for the most part, and there is a little bit of action and violence towards the end of the movie. Mostly, I can't help but feel like this story direction is just infinitely less interesting, less compelling than the story that it was building up to before. And I don't know, there were certain things that happened towards the end of this movie that kind of took me out of it, made things feel a little bit more anticlimactic than they should have been. On the one hand, I do commend the movie because it takes kind of a fresh, different approach to how it ends things in this movie, but at the same time, it just doesn't make you feel like sitting through the slower parts of the movie makes it worth it. The pacing definitely drags towards the second act of the movie because of this decision. I'll also say there's a character that makes a decision in the third act that doesn't really make sense with how they've set this character up for the rest of the movie. I don't want to sound like a gore whore, and I'm not saying that I needed the movie to be a slam bang action movie. I didn't need the movie to be like bloody and over the top violent, but I don't know, I feel like they still could have delivered a little bit more on the intensity and the setup of the premise and how this movie started, and they could have delivered something a little bit more satisfying by the end. If you're looking for an action movie, you're not really gonna find that, but the movie is slow burn, it's methodical in its approach. Aaron Pierre, that guy, he's a superstar. He's going places. I'm immediately interested in anything that this man does from here on out. Rebel Ridge was a really good time. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I'm gonna leave this one in the Silver Age for Man of Steel. So have you seen it? What did you think about it? Give me your thoughts on the movie in the comment section down below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and if you like what you see, tell me how you feel and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.